current lack of hygiene and missing hair would have to wait. There were more important matters to ponder. She turned her head and studied Miss James, wondering what had possessed the young lady to attempt to procure a husband through the mail. Had the young lady resorted to such drastic measures because of pressure from family members? Or had the advertisement Miss James answered been written in such an enticing fashion that the lady simply couldn't help herself? It truly was unfortunate, whatever the lady's reasoning, that Miss James apparently felt one was not complete unless one had the attention of a gentleman, even if said gentleman was one she'd never met. Deciding her time would be better spent figuring a way out of jail instead of contemplating the workings of a young lady's mind, Arabella closed her eyes and turned to God. "Dear Lord, thank you for lending me your guidance and support in the matter of rescuing Miss James. Please continue to keep her safe, and if you could, would it be possible to send me some assistance?" She opened her eyes and nodded. That should do the trick. God would show her a way out, but until that time she needed to keep a clear head and mull through her options. She had rights. Granted, they were slim to none since she was a woman, but she could not be held indefinitely, could she? Knowing far too well that the rights of women were cast aside on the whims of gentlemen on a daily basis, Arabella felt her jaw clench. The reality was that, yes, she might be held behind bars for a very long time. She should have been more diligent in her attempts at getting the laws changed. It certainly lent a different perspective to the inequalities facing women when she was the one behind bars, yet now was hardly the time to think about that. As she smoothed down the wrinkled mess of her skirt, her attention settled on the good 6 inches of mud attached to her hem, and she suddenly remembered the money she'd stashed in that hem. She could offer the sheriff the money and secure her release. No, that would never do. She blew out a breath. The sheriff would surely look at that as a bribe, and then she would never escape the confines of the small cell. The sound of footsteps caused her to blink out of her thoughts and lean forward on the bench, her attention focused on the narrow hallway in the dank and dreary basement jail that led to her cell. The footsteps stopped, and a gentleman came into view. It was rather odd, but she got the distinct impression he was annoyed, probably because he was glaring at her through the bars. She swallowed a sigh. As a woman who was known for having strong opinions, dealing with annoyed gentlemen seemed to be a common occurrence in her life. She leaned farther forward on the bench, intent on addressing the gentleman, but suddenly found she was at a complete loss for words when she got a good look at his face. The gentleman was possessed of features that could have been sculpted by a master. Sharp cheekbones complemented a straight blade of a nose, and his eyes were as dark as his brows, which were currently drawn together as if the man were contemplating a weighty matter. Her gaze drifted to his hair, which was liberally streaked with gold and looked quite untidy at the moment, as though the gentleman had been running his hands through it out of sheer aggravation. She had the sneaking suspicion she might be the cause of that aggravation. Her gaze drifted downward, lingering on shoulders encased in an overcoat of exceptionally fine wool. An attorney would wear such a coat. Perhaps God was already answering her prayer regarding assistance, and perhaps the man was only annoyed with her because he'd been roused from his house in the middle of the night to bail her out of jail. Feeling a bit more charitable toward the gentleman, she allowed herself a moment to finish her perusal. He was very brawny, but no, that wasn't quite right. She tilted her head. He was tall, certainly, well over 6 feet from what she could tell, but his overcoat was tailored at the waist, lending the impression of trimness, while his shoulders— a frisson of something unexpected raced down her spine. That was peculiar. She'd never felt a frisson of anything quite like that before, but maybe it had only been another one of those pesky globs of mud that was still attached to her person. She nodded in relief over that particular reasoning and regarded his shoulders once again, unable to help being somewhat impressed. They were so broad, and they gave testimony to the fact that here was a gentleman who could handle himself well in disturbing situations. Her eyes widened as she realized he was a gentleman who commanded attention, and he was also one who would have no trouble getting her and Miss James released from jail. She shifted her gaze back to his face, frowning when she realized